close this up and open up Visual Studio. Game HL2. So our goal here is going to be to define two new console commands, plus jets and minus jets, so that when we press the J key, it will give us an actual command that's called. And the best way to do this is to go and search for commands we already know exist, and then try and duplicate them with some modifications. So if you click this little folder up here, you'll get to this Find in Files window. And one of the commands in those configuration files that we were looking at earlier was plus jump, which is roughly the same functionality we want for the plus jets. We see it shows up in 3 different files, so we'll check them all. This one, it seems like it's only here in comments, so that's not the one we want. Right here, it does show up, but again, this doesn't really seem like it's defining it. But right here, we see a whole bunch of con commands, just the things we wanted to define. So we'll copy this plus jump and minus jump, except now we can edit them to be start jets, end jets. We'll change the command. And now we'll see this other argument. This, if you hover your mouse over it or right click and press go to definition, you'll see is a function. Now presumably, whenever this con command object gets called by using the string entered in the first argument, it's safe to assume that it will call the function referenced as the second argument. So we're going to need to create an in jets down and an in jets up function. And again, we can copy the ones for jumping and simply change their names around a little bit. And over here, key down function takes an in jump object. We're going to have to create an in jets object, so let's rename these now and worry about creating it in a minute. And then, again, we right click, hit go to definition on in jump, and we'll copy this over and create an in jets object. Now, if you're ever curious about what all of these define types, K button, T, you see some odd function, go ahead, feel free to deviate from the tutorial a little bit. Right click, hit go to definition, explore it, try to figure out what it does. The best way to learn about the source engine is to go and try and read through it. If you get curious about something, try and chase it down and figure out what exactly it's doing. Getting back on track, the last thing we want to do here is be sure that there's nothing left over. So we're going to do one last search for jump in this file and see if we can find anything. This is new. So we see all of these calc button bits functions inside of this get button bits function. If we scroll up, we'll see in the comments the purpose is to return the button info, and all of these calc button bits fill in this integer and use it as a bit vector. This is a very compact way to represent a bunch of different flags, in this case representing the state of various buttons. So we'll have to add in a new command to fill it with our value for in jets. Again, we'll copy and paste, and we'll modify it to use an in jets flag. Doesn't quite exist yet. In jets there. And now we'll go find the definition of in jump. We'll find it in inbuttons.h. There are all these definitions. These are basically definitions to define which place in that bit field should be used for which particular key. So we'll add in jets. and we'll just put it at the end. We'll save that. And then we'll go back to in main. And the one last thing that I want to do here is to make it a little more visible that this is all doing what we want it to. So, in this inJetsDown function, this is just a regular function call, so we can add another statement in here. And one of the more common debugging techniques is to just add in something so that it will print to the console. And to do this in the source engine, we can use the MSG function. It works just like the standard library's printf function, except it prints to the source console. And it will only print in debug mode depending on which version of MSG you use. There are several that are all defined in dbg.h. I highly recommend that you go and look up all of the various debugging functions that are included, because they will make your life a lot easier if you want to test whether or not something is working. And we'll add in a new line, save, and now we'll build it. Now that everything's been built, just hit the green button and start debugging. See what happens. We'll load up our little test map, map M1. We'll hit the J key, and then we'll see what we see. And right here, that message we added in is displayed right there, so we know it's working. So now we can quit out. So before we move on, we want to commit. We've made a lot of changes, and we've gotten to the point where we've made these changes, we know it compiles, and we know it does what we want it to do. So we'll remove this debugging message. We'll save, and we'll open up our mod source folder. Right-click on the only one that's got the red exclamation mark, and click svn commit, and that'll bring up this commit window. Now, let's explain a bit about this. You'll see a bunch of non-version files. This means that they exist in the folder, but they're not checked into the repository, so we don't have to worry about them. If we added a new file that we wanted to be checked into the repository, it would be listed as non-versioned, and we would check it to commit it and add it to the repository. However, there's a couple of files here that we don't actually want to have. This ncb file, suo file, these we don't want, and they're in use by Visual Studio, so we'll close Visual Studio and we'll delete them. Now, since we only want source files that we created to be committed and not anything made by the compiler, let's go ahead and also delete these .htm files. Now we can commit the H file and the CPP file that we were concerned with, and also remove these other files that we didn't want to have in the repository. And it's all completed.